The moment I discovered I was expecting, Jason was over the moon, spinning me around like a kid on a merry-go-round. But after that, he never tagged along to any of my follow-up appointments. I figured he was just swamped with work. That is, until I accidentally heard him chatting with a buddy. She'd gone through a miscarriage before, Ian, but with another guy. Honestly, just the thought that she's experienced such loss makes my stomach turn. Jason wasn't the type to invite friends over for dinner often. Our living room was always loud, filled with the mix of booze and cigarette smoke. To keep the peace, I would hide away in the bedroom. Occasionally, Jason would come in, bringing me some chicken soup or a bunch of freshly washed fruit. Eventually, he handed me a warm glass of milk. As he walked in, his friend yelled from outside the door, "No way! Who knew Jason, the laid-back dude, could be so sweet all of a sudden?" I felt my cheeks burn instantly. Jason laughed it off, telling his friend off before shutting the door behind him. He watched me sip the milk and then helped me settle back into bed. Before leaving, he crouched down, resting his face against my belly, his voice soft. "Hey, love. Is the baby doing okay? Not bothering you, right?" I nodded and gently pushed him away, but my heart felt all warm and fuzzy. Just like his friend mentioned, Jason, usually so chill, had been treating me like pure gold since the pregnancy news. Everyone around us commented that they'd never seen him so kind to anyone. I drifted off to sleep and woke up feeling groggy. Turning over, I saw the space next to me was empty. Jason hadn't come back to the bedroom yet. Faint voices from the living room floated in and out of my awareness. When I opened the door, I caught Jason saying, "It doesn't matter that she's not a virgin. The main thing is she's lost a baby before, with another guy." Honestly, just thinking about her womb having experienced death made me feel nauseous. I stood there frozen, my feet heavy as lead. Jason hadn't had much to drink. He was speaking sincerely. The phrase, "her womb has seen death," clung to my nerves, making me shiver. His best friend cleared his throat and asked, "So why'd you marry her?" Jason sighed with a bitter smile. I thought I could accept it. But once she got pregnant, I guess I just can't handle it. Silence enveloped them, the living room so quiet I could almost hear their breathing. I couldn't see Jason's face or imagine the disgust he must have felt saying those words. Until I felt a slight movement in my belly, snapping me back to reality. I held back tears and lay back down. The blanket's warmth had significantly faded. Lying in bed, my fingers trembled uncontrollably. I never thought Jason would be bothered or feel disgusted, and when we were together, I was upfront with him about being assaulted by a stranger. At that time, Jason said, "How could I mind? I can't stand seeing you hurt." I believed him. I thought we were mature enough to handle things openly. I never expected the adult world to be riddled with lies. Even if he seemed to love me completely, he still casually called me disgusting in front of his friends. My heart felt like it had been run over by a truck, suffocating and painful. The baby inside me kicked restlessly. I closed my eyes, trying to manage my emotions, soothing both him and myself. Jason came back to bed after a shower. It was already 3 a.m. He wrapped his arms around my waist from behind. When I tried to push him away, he let go. The smell of smoke and alcohol had almost disappeared. He must have been on the balcony for a while. "Good night, baby," he whispered softly, but it hit me hard. He loved me, yet it felt like he didn't. Jason left early in the morning. I hadn't slept all night, only opening my eyes after he was gone. Sunlight streamed into the living room. On the dining table was breakfast he'd made for me: scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and a cup of warm milk. He even left a thoughtful note. "Your favorite millet porridge is in the rice cooker." The guy who called me disgusting the day before had turned around and shown me such care. It left my mind swirling with confusion. The breakfast wasn't the issue. It was that the happiness I once felt now tasted bland. I couldn't understand. He must love me, right? If he didn't, why would he do so many thoughtful things? But if he did love me, why would he say those hurtful things and skip today's appointment? We had agreed yesterday afternoon he'd join me for the checkup. Jason didn't answer my 3 calls. The automated voice on the line wore down my patience. People are like that. Once there's a rift, it brings out all sorts of complicated emotions. Like now, I couldn't shake off the bitterness and irritation inside me. Yet every time Jason missed a checkup before, I calmly accepted it, convincing myself he was just busy with work. Just as I stepped outside, Jason finally replied to my message with 3 hurried words. In a meeting. Jason must have genuinely forgotten my checkup date and probably the hospital too. So, when I bumped into him at the obstetrics and gynecology department, he looked panicked and lost. I spotted him while waiting outside the imaging room for my ultrasound. He was walking side by side with a girl. To be exact, she had her arm linked through his. With tear-filled eyes, she looked at Jason and said, "Jason, it hurts so much. My stomach really hurts. Am I going to die?" "Don't say," Jason began, but the words got stuck in his throat. He saw me and I was smiling broadly. Our eyes met and Jason abruptly pulled his arm away. "Emily, Emily?" He hurried over, his voice shaking in a way he didn't even realize. But what was he scared of? I took a step back, shifting my gaze to the girl's face. I felt like I'd seen her somewhere, but I couldn't quite place her. Jason stood in front of her, saying to me, "Baby, are you feeling unwell? Why did you come to the hospital?" Maybe even he found it ridiculous. His sentence faltered and never finished. "I came for my checkup," I interrupted his awkward act. The girl stepped out from behind him, meeting my eyes with a youthful and provocative gleam. "So you're Jason's wife?" Jason brought me into the examination room. The doctor called him in. "You never come for the checkups." Being pregnant isn't just your wife's responsibility. Now that you're in the later months, there are many important things to note. I'll mention a point. You write it down. The doctor's tone was rather stern. Jason pressed his lips together and nodded, jotting down note after note in his phone's memo. He kept apologizing as if each of his previous absences had been unintentional, but it wasn't until today I realized he had done it on purpose. He didn't want to come to the checkups because he found me disgusting. Watching him type away, I suddenly remembered the day I found out I was pregnant. That day, I hid the pregnancy test stick behind me and softly hinted to Jason, "I think I might be pregnant." Jason practically leapt off the sofa, his eyes shining with uncontainable joy. He suddenly hugged me tightly, then seemed to remember to be gentle. When he saw the test stick, he spun me around in circles in the living room. I clearly remember he was genuinely, truly happy that day. That's why he rushed me to the hospital first thing the next morning to register. Later, when filling out paperwork, the nurse asked if I'd been pregnant before. I answered truthfully, not noticing the look on Jason's face beside me. So, when he suddenly made an excuse to leave in a hurry, I naturally thought work was keeping him busy. Now that I think back, it feels like a needle piercing my heart, sending waves of pain throughout. When Jason and I came out, the girl was still there. She was sitting on a bench, holding her stomach and looking down. I could clearly feel Jason's body tense up and his nervousness in that moment. "Aren't you going to check on her?" I moved to the side, creating some space between us. My voice wasn't loud, but the girl still heard me. Or maybe, despite her bowed head, her attention hadn't really left Jason. She lifted her head, tears welling in her eyes. "Jason, you finally came out." Jason glanced at me, then walked over. He took her arm and brought her in front of me. "Emily, I'll take Sophie to see a doctor first." "Can you go back by yourself?" Sophie, now I remember, a name I often saw on Jason's mother's Instagram. I had asked Jason about her. He said she was the daughter of our neighbors and had gone abroad after graduating high school. Just a couple of days ago, I saw on Instagram that she was back in the country. I studied her as she studied me. "It's okay, I can go see the doctor by myself. You should stay with Emily." Jason's hand didn't release her arm, and his eyes showed a hint of displeasure as he looked at me. In that moment, I silently condemned Jason in my heart. He repeated my name, Emily. I smiled and nodded. "All right." Almost as soon as I got home, Jason arrived. He tossed the car keys onto the entryway table, making a small noise as if to get my attention. I sat on the sofa, not turning to look at him. "Baby, are you mad? Don't get it twisted. I need to explain." He walked around to the back of the sofa, placing his hands on my shoulders. I didn't push his hands away, but suddenly wanted to hear how he would justify everything that happened at the hospital today. "Go ahead." I shifted my gaze to the coffee table where a recent photo of us was displayed. He was cradling my pregnant belly, smiling brightly. But even that brightness felt fake. Sophie just came back from abroad. Mom asked me to arrange an internship for her. My assistant is on maternity leave, so I thought she could give it a try. Don't worry, I'm 6 years older than her. To me, she's just a kid. Jason moved to kneel in front of me, his large hand resting on my belly through my clothes. His explanation was vague. He didn't explain why he forgot my prenatal checkup or why he went to the hospital with her. Instead, he brushed over their closeness with a casual, "She's just a kid." I exhaled deeply, pushing Jason's hand away. "You feel guilty." I didn't say anything. "You feel guilty." I didn't say anything. The real heartbreak wasn't about the loud arguments. I leaned back on the sofa, watching Jason busy in the kitchen, and couldn't help but laugh. Love in the end was reduced to weighing pros and cons. I weighed the timing for divorce while he weighed family, marriage, and so-called love. Maybe he really was feeling guilty. He was more attentive and caring than before. The dining table was filled with all my favorite dishes. He had given the housekeeper a day off and cooked himself. But even with such a delicious dinner, I couldn't taste anything. Jason was actually a good cook. When we first got together, he almost handled all our meals. From burning pots in the beginning to now being an excellent chef. After we got married, he got busier with work. Even after hiring a housekeeper, he kept the habit of making breakfast himself every day. Jason served a bowl of soup and placed it in front of me. "Try it. I just learned this." I put down my chopsticks and brought the bowl to my lips, only to start gagging. Jason was alarmed. He squatted down in front of me, his brows knitted together. "Are you feeling sick again? Didn't your morning sickness stop for a while? I'll take you to the hospital." Seeing Jason's anxious expression, my tears finally fell. I thought to myself, if only I hadn't heard those words. Maybe things could still be the way they were before. But there are no ifs. Once a crack forms, there's no fixing it. It seemed my tears burned Jason. He stopped leaving early for work and instead personally drove me to my workplace before heading to his own. He no longer worked late. He picked me up after work, coming home to cook for us. Besides that incident at the hospital, I couldn't pinpoint his mistakes. Yet the more perfect he became, the more his guilt stood out. The thought of divorce lingered in my mind, day in and day out. Until that day when Sophie called, Jason was still in the shower, but his phone kept ringing. I picked it up and saw an unknown number. After hanging up, she persistently called back. Jason must have heard as he shouted without thinking, "Baby, please answer the phone for me." Maybe he never considered it could be Sophie, or maybe he never thought she'd call at that moment. "Jason, I think I'm pregnant. Where are you? I want to see you." It was probably me who didn't hold the phone steady, as it slipped from my hand and crashed to the ground. The screen shattered like a spider web, and the voice on the other end abruptly cut off. I stood frozen in place. When Jason came out drying his hair, he saw my dazed expression and the broken phone in the distance. I was confused. I was confused why I had thought I couldn't uncover his mistakes just a few days ago. And I was confused about how Jason could split his heart in two and remain so calm. Jason cleaned up the shards on the floor and helped me back to the bedroom. He seemed unfazed, only asking, "Who was calling so late?" Questions circled my lips several times, but I swallowed them back. I shifted over on the bed and turned off one lamp. "I didn't catch it. The phone just fell. You didn't save the number." I didn't dare look at Jason's expression, fearing he'd notice something off about me. At least not now. I couldn't and shouldn't confront Jason. "It's okay, probably not important. I'll just buy a new one tomorrow. Let's sleep now, honey." Saying that, he pulled back the covers and was about to lie down. I stopped him. "You should sleep in the guest room. I haven't been sleeping well these past few days. I'm not sure if it's because you snore." I casually made up a reason. In truth, Jason was very quiet when he slept and didn't snore at all. He paused for a second, scratched his head, and chuckled. "All right. Next time I bother you, just wake me up." I looked at him, gripping the blanket tighter. He even believed he snored. Jason grabbed a pillow and walked out. When the door closed behind him, I finally relaxed my grip. I turned off the light, unable to sleep through the night. I took a day off from work. Jason wanted to stay home with me, but I sent him off to the office. After he left, I stepped out as well. I contacted a law firm specializing in divorce cases. The lawyer's expression was one of extreme surprise when I walked in. During pregnancy, only the woman has the right to file for divorce, either by agreement or through litigation. What made me hesitate was the baby in my belly. I once thought I could give him a happy home with a loving mother and caring father. But now, that seemed impossible. "Are you ready to be a single mom?" The lawyer, who looked to be about my age, handed me a cup of hot water. I pressed my lips together. "I've made up my mind. I think I can be a good mom and play the role of a good dad, and no." I didn't mention Jason or Sophie. Without evidence, I didn't want to make baseless accusations. I only asked her to help me create 2 proposals for property division. She probably understood. After all, they'd likely see more than I was currently experiencing. After leaving the law firm, I returned to my mom's house. The bumpy drive took nearly an hour, bringing me to the countryside. When I arrived at the door, she was sitting on a low stool, preparing vegetables. Her hunched back and gray hair reminded me of the year she had taken my hand, resolutely divorcing my father and leaving that not-so-great home. My mom could do it. I thought I could too. I didn't go back. Jason called several times. "Baby, why aren't you at home? Why did you go to your mom's? Let me pick you up." His voice sounded a bit tired. Just as I was about to refuse, my mom grabbed the phone. "Jason, I haven't seen Emily in ages. Emily's staying with me for a couple of days, so don't worry." "There's no need to call if nothing's urgent." She tossed the phone onto the table and sat down next to me. Her rough hand stroked my cheek, brushing away the tears from the corners of my eyes, bringing me a sense of peace like never before. "It's okay, baby. I'm not asking why. Mom will always stand by you. If you want to live on your own, we can do that." "Didn't I raise you all by myself?" I cried and laughed at the same time. "That's right. Without Jason, I can still be just fine." After resting with my mom for 2 days and processing all the negativity, I finally reached a state of acceptance about the divorce. I went to Jason's company. As he hurried down from upstairs, Sophie happened to come out of another elevator. She leaned against the wall, looking at me with a half smile. Jason didn't notice her. "What are you doing here? Is the baby behaving? Has it been causing you trouble?" I pulled my gaze from Sophie back to Jason and shook my head. "Isn't it almost time for you to get off work? Give me the car keys. I'll wait for you in the car." I should be grateful for Jason's trust. So, when I initially installed the dash cam, I chose a dual lens model. And he didn't object. Now he hadn't deleted the recordings, and I could find what I wanted in the footage. But the content was too clear. Clear like a knife, slicing through my heart, which I'd grown somewhat numb to. Jason had rejected Sophie. The first time, she threw herself into his arms, but he pushed her away. The second time, she leaned closer to his face, and he pushed her away again. The third time, when she kissed him on the face, he pushed her away once more. The third time, when she kissed him, he didn't push her away this time. He held the back of her head, kissing her passionately. That was also when their car drove into the hotel's underground garage early in the morning. They walked to the elevator together and didn't appear until around 1 in the afternoon, a gap of 3 to 4 hours. That day was when he forgot to accompany me to my prenatal checkup, but showed up at the hospital with Sophie. For some reason, I felt an inexplicable sense of relief. When Jason opened the driver's door, I was already squinting against the seat. He cast a somewhat apologetic glance outside the passenger window. That's when I noticed that Sophie was just a door away from me. "Emily, Mom just called us back for dinner." Perfect timing. I straightened up and glanced at Sophie outside the door. She was tightly gripping her bag, smiling a bit forcefully, and her voice dropped. "Jason, I can manage." Sophie wanted to sit in the front passenger seat. She ended up in the back, resting her head against the window, dry heaving for a while. She said she was carsick and asked if she could sit in the back. I saw a flicker of hesitation in Jason's eyes. I pointed at my protruding belly and shook my head. "No, it's not convenient." Jason didn't say anything else but drove slowly. Slower than usual when I rode with him alone. He occasionally glanced at the rearview mirror, a perfect angle to observe Sophie's mood. Their relationship seemed to be developing faster than I had imagined. I closed my eyes, pretending not to see anything. It wasn't until we entered Jason's parents' home and met his mother's astonished gaze that I realized I had misunderstood. In Jason's words, we referred to him and Sophie, and I was merely the unexpected guest. A chilling realization crawled up my heart almost instantly, spreading throughout my body. I thought I wouldn't care, but seeing their contrasting attitudes toward me and Sophie, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. Jason's parents had never liked me. They said I was a child from a single-parent family and must be lacking something. Eventually, due to Jason's insistence, we got married. But they rarely invited us over for dinner. Neither of us wanted that. Only when I got pregnant did our relationship improve. Watching Sophie laugh joyfully between them, I suddenly understood. Those frequent appearances of Sophie on Instagram were perhaps meant for me to see. They had never liked me. Maybe because I was an uninvited guest, they spoke in dialect during dinner, a dialect I used to not understand at all. After secretly learning it for a long time, I could understand it now. But since I rarely saw them, I said nothing. No one knew, including Jason. Weren't you supposed to be just you and Sophie? Why is she here too? Sophie, eat more. You look so thin. The food abroad isn't good, is it? I specially made you rib soup. You should try it. Jason's mother spoke quickly and urgently. It took me a moment to comprehend. She really liked Sophie, it seemed. She kept giving Jason meaningful looks, urging him to serve Sophie more food. Even Jason's usually taciturn father was talking more than usual, smiling at Sophie with crinkled eyes. Sophie, stay put while you're back home. Don't go out. What a shame we thought about bringing you back to be Jason's wife. Right, Jason? I lowered my head and absent-mindedly shoveled some rice into my mouth. Jason chuckled awkwardly, serving me some food. Emily, try Mom's cooking. Jason's actions seemed to remind them, and the topic abruptly changed, becoming forced. I pretended not to understand and didn't eat what Jason served afterward. The dinner continued with each of us lost in our thoughts. I had no idea what Jason was thinking, but I knew it was almost time to confront him. If Jason's mother hadn't insisted he safely drop Sophie off at home, I probably wouldn't have known Sophie lived in the same community as us, just a floor apart. As the elevator stopped on the 18th floor, Sophie turned back to glance at me. Jason, thank you for bringing me back. I'll head home now. She waved her hand and smiled sweetly. As the elevator doors closed, Jason relaxed his straightened back. Your parents really like her, I casually remarked as the elevator door opened again. Jason halted, his hand on my arm retracting slightly. Yeah, they've always wanted a daughter. I nodded, not saying anything else. Perhaps sensing my mood had dropped, Jason had been trying to cheer me up since he returned. The more he tried, the calmer I became. Maybe he didn't even realize that whenever Sophie was around, he would refer to me as Emily instead of baby. When he went to take a shower, he tossed his phone onto the couch. The unlocked password was my birthday. The wallpaper was a picture of us together, only I was pinned at the top of his messages. Even his Instagram background and most of the content were about me. I closed my eyes and opened the chat with Sophie. Jason, I don't need you to take responsibility. I know a girl's first time is important. I did it willingly. I just feel uncomfortable. I want to throw up. I've never been pregnant, and we didn't use protection that day. I'm just worried. Jason, I think I'm really falling for you. Just as I exited the chat, Sophie sent a message. A red notification, only a brief ellipsis. The suddenly appearing ellipsis, like a secret signal. I glanced out the window. The night was shrouded in moonlight, hazy and indistinct. Jason came out of the shower and grabbed his phone from the couch. By his actions, he seemed to have opened the message and then closed it again. I leaned back on the sofa, the lychee in my mouth too sweet to handle. About 2 minutes later, Jason came out with a garbage bag from the kitchen. Baby, I'm going to take out the trash. If you're tired, go to sleep. Before I could respond, he pushed the door open and walked out. The elevator door opened and closed again. I stood at the door, watching the elevator stop on the 18th floor and start descending. I didn't follow but walked to the balcony. Jason and Sophie exited the building one after the other. The streetlights stretched their shadows long. Until I walked far away, the shadows overlapped, making it hard to see clearly. I went to the storage room and pulled out the suitcase. There were only a few clothes that Jason usually wore, which I tossed in haphazardly. I also packed his documents and laptop. I dragged the suitcase downstairs. The summer night breeze felt warm against my skin, yet I was engulfed in a chilling sensation. As night fell, the lights in the community automatically dimmed. I don't know how long it took, but finally, Jason appeared, coming closer from a distance. Sophie followed behind him, her expression unreadable. From afar, our three gazes met, and they came to a stop. Jason stood at the door, repeatedly calling my name. Unfortunately, the neighbor across the hall was abroad, so no one came out to scold him. Through the peephole, I saw Sophie gripping the suitcase handle tightly, standing by the elevator door. Jason couldn't get in. Before coming downstairs, I deleted his fingerprint access. Nancy, can you let me explain? Nancy, please don't do this. I'm scared. Jason kept repeating those lines. The word scared sounded almost like a joke. Who would openly admit to being scared? Bored with his pleas, I returned to my bedroom. Maybe the heavy stone pressing on my chest had finally shifted because I slept well that night. Jason didn't wait at the door anymore. I didn't know when he left. His suitcase was still outside. I went to the law firm and picked up the final version of the divorce agreement. When I arranged to meet Jason, my lawyer accompanied me. I chose a coffee shop that wasn't too crowded. Sitting on the second floor by the window, I saw Jason rushing over. My lawyer followed my gaze and took a sip of her coffee. Maybe I should talk to him later, she suggested. I shook my head. No, I can handle it. Ever since that day he had belittled me with a disgusting comment, I had considered divorce. My hesitation didn't stem from love for Jason. I just didn't know how to equip our unborn child with armor to shield him from cold stares and discrimination as he grew. Only after my mom's words did I realize the love I could give my child was the armor. Jason couldn't bear to look at the divorce agreement. Nancy, who's this? His voice trembled slightly. It was rare for someone he didn't know to be beside me. He always remembered my friends and colleagues. Hello, Mr. Jason. I'm Rita, Nancy's attorney. As the business card was pushed in front of him, the color drained from his face, bit by bit. Take a look. If everything's fine, just sign. There's no dispute about the child's custody. Check the property division. I cradled a cup of hot milk, sipping it absent-mindedly, as if discussing something trivial. Nancy, can we talk alone? Miss Rita, would that be okay? Jason's gaze flickered, his voice growing hoarse. No need. Rita knows what she should and shouldn't know. Just say what you have to say. The lawyer's here to help evaluate any changes. I placed my cup on the table, my tone calm. A flicker of struggle crossed Jason's eyes, and after a long pause, he spoke. It was just once with Sophie. I regret it, Nancy. I never meant to betray you. It was just a moment. I interrupted him. You only found me disgusting because I had a miscarriage. You could have continued to reject Sophie, but you didn't. You chose to give up on me, on our child. That doesn't sound right, though. Actually, when I heard you say I was disgusting, I knew I couldn't stay with you anymore. Whether or not Sophie existed, I would have divorced you. It was I who gave you up. If you insist on not getting divorced, we may consider litigation. Mr. Jason, you might want to think it over. Jason refused to divorce. The lawyer routinely reminded him. I stood up from my seat and before leaving, took off my wedding ring. Jason, we could do this more gracefully. There's no need for a scene that leaves everyone looking bad, right? Through the floor-to-ceiling window, I glanced at Sophie waiting downstairs. I wasn't sure what Jason truly felt for her. He said it was a moment of weakness. Later, he considered distancing himself from Sophie, drawing a line. But for some reason, things spiraled beyond his control. He seemed unable to shake her off, so he treated me even better than before, as if that might ease his guilt. He claimed he never found me repulsive, but couldn't explain why it suddenly felt impossible to continue. In truth, he didn't need to struggle. The moment he started struggling, we were destined to end. Can love lead to separation in the end? Turns out, it can. I applied for remote work at the company, and soon I could take maternity leave. My mom came over to our home, helping me pack up what I needed and move out. I rented an apartment nearby, and a nanny came a few times a week. My mom moved in with me. Before I moved out, Jason came back a few times. As soon as I brought out the divorce agreement, he fled in a panic. Later, when he realized I'd moved, He called me multiple times, but until he agreed to the divorce, I refused to meet him. Jason stopped my mom at the supermarket. He followed her home all the way. He stood at the entrance, caught between wanting to come in and wanting to leave. My mom, face darkened, went into the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a loud thud. I turned and went into the bedroom, coming out with a revised version of the divorce agreement from my lawyer. "You're just in time. The property division part has been amended. Take a look." All right. Originally, my lawyer suggested I keep the house. She worried about me moving during late pregnancy, considering formaldehyde, and the current house had a great location. After thinking for a long time, I realized I probably couldn't accept living in the house that Jason had once occupied. I asked the lawyer to convert it to cash based on market value, taking the larger share. I placed the agreement on the console table and set down a pen beside it. "Jason, please don't do this. We have a child. You can't let him be born without a father." "Jason, I really have cut ties with Sophie, I swear." Jason grasped my arm. He didn't use much force, yet I still stopped. "Jason, I grew up without a dad, and I don't want my child to have a father like you." I shot him a cold glance. If looks could kill, I imagined he would have been shredded by now. "No, Emily, that's not what I meant. I truly understand my mistakes. I never wanted to separate. I was just careless. You can hit or scold me. Please don't abandon me, okay? You and the baby can't just dismiss me." Jason still didn't sign. When he left, he greeted us. My mom ignored him, sternly calling me to dinner. Before we finished eating, Jason's parents arrived. I had no idea how they found me. "Emily, open the door. Who do you think you are to divorce my son? Even if you divorce, the child in your belly is still ours, and you can't take him away." Jason's mother shouted from outside, cursing. My mom's expression turned cold instantly. She rushed to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and ran to the door, just like she did when protecting me as a child. When the door opened, Jason's mother fell silent. Then came a piercing scream. My mom stood at the door, sneering, trying to shout again. I stepped in to mediate. Marriage has never been just between two people. It dawned on me that all those romantic notions about love conquering all couldn't stand against the mundane reality of life. Divorce is best for both of us. If you don't like me, I don't want to please you either. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, I actually understood everything you said at dinner that day. Surprised? To fit into your family, I learned your dialect. Jason happened to arrive just as I finished speaking. He opened his mouth, forcing a bitter smile. It was on the day of my routine checkup that Jason agreed to the divorce. At 30 weeks pregnant, I was scheduled for a 4-dimensional ultrasound. He met me at the hospital. The doctor glanced at Jason and smiled approvingly. He looked at me with a pleading expression. "Emily, can I just take a look? Please, consider it a favor." He still followed me into the ultrasound room. The baby's 4-dimensional ultrasound images appeared on the screen, and Jason's eyes were already red. The doctor said the baby was healthy. He had a sharp chin, just like mine. His little legs were long. He would grow up to be tall like his dad. Jason broke down in tears and then rushed out. The doctor didn't notice anything unusual and joked that Jason was just overly emotional. I forced a smile, pushing down the last bit of bitterness inside. This was probably Jason's first and last time seeing the child. The checkup went smoothly. Jason also signed the divorce agreement. I rented a place near the office. He and his mom could move back. When the baby is born, we'll meet a nanny, and a bigger house will be more convenient. I've arranged for postpartum recovery sessions. I just hadn't had a chance to tell you. I'll have them contact you later. His voice got lower with each word until he finally fell silent. I never doubted Jason's sincerity. I just didn't need it anymore. No need for that. I found a place I like and have already paid the deposit. I'm looking for a nanny myself, so just refund the postpartum recovery fees. See you at the Civil Affairs Bureau at 9 a.m. tomorrow. On the day I gave birth, my mom paced back and forth outside the delivery room. She told me Jason had come too. After hearing that both mother and baby were safe, he left. I nodded, my gaze falling on the small pink bundle beside me. The baby was very well behaved. I hardly had to exert myself during the delivery. It's a boy. He can protect mommy when he grows up. When the nurse brought him to me, I couldn't hold back my tears. I had my little armor. Before he grew up, I would be his armor too. Later, I found out that Sophie was really pregnant. Jason's parents were thrilled. They urged Jason to marry Sophie, fearing she would be wronged. But Jason was unwilling. He didn't want to marry Sophie, nor did he want that child. Both families nearly tore each other apart over this, making it a public scandal. Sophie went to the hospital for an abortion anyway. Jason accompanied her. I guess Jason never expected that the thing he once found disgusting was now what he was doing himself.